It's time for the North Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.
Hey, what's going on? It's the North Idaho Prepcast, your weekly stop down of District 1 and 2 athletics in the state of Idaho. My name is Brandon Baney. Our North Idaho resident and expert is the one and only Ryan Scaggs. Ryan, what's up?
Not much. Got engaged on Friday. So yeah, no, that's what's up in my life and in my world. Things just all of a sudden I decided, being a dad wasn't crazy enough. I needed to have a wedding thrown in the mix too.
Yes, congratulations on getting engaged to Abby,
Yeah.
your
Yes.
wonderful fiance. Okay, behind the scenes here, a little inside baseball here on the the North Idaho Prepcast. We started recording actually about 10. Well, I thought we were recording about 10 minutes. We spent about 10 minutes talking about Ryan's proposal and how he proposed, and plan A didn't work and he had to go to plan B. And we just kind of talked about what a great person Abby is and how exciting the news is and wedding plans and all that stuff. We spent, I'm not joking, 10 minutes. And we get done and I'm going to transition into regular sports stuff, and I look over and the stupid record button didn't actually get going. So we actually didn't record any of the beautiful stuff we said about your engagement, and basically just spent 10 minutes talking to each other and nobody else. So
that's okay. I mean, yeah, no, it's exciting. So
all right. Well, give I already heard the full story and our audience wants to hear it as well. Give us though the kind of the Cliff Notes version of this proposal and how it went down.
So she's a super sentimental person. So I thought about the whole, and I'm kind of a goofy, more gregarious, kind of fun-loving guy. And I wasn't going to, I know she hates being embarrassed. And so I wasn't going to do the whole big dinner, in front of a bunch of people proposal type thing, because I know that would make her extremely uncomfortable. So yeah, I had planned to propose in a photo booth, and needless to say, her and my son were both hangry and wanted dinner instead. And so my plans of proposing before dinner and then kind of doing a celebration thing afterwards were thwarted by dinner time. And so we ended up going to dinner, and then went for a walk after dinner, and I proposed on the boardwalk at the Coeur d'Alene Resort. And yeah, it was special. It was still great, but yeah, plan A wasn't working out. So I had to shift gears and kind of improvise, and ended up still being great.
Yeah. And the first time you told the story was great, but I really enjoyed the second retelling as well. So again, we spent 10 minutes talking about Ryan's engagement and wedding plans, and we weren't recording. So here we are now, a little shorter version. Congratulations. Very
Thank
exciting you. For you and Abby, certainly. Okay. Now let's talk about the sports scene in North Idaho. A lot of, finally, the weather had kind of cleared up, and then we're recording this on Wednesday, April 12th. Yesterday, the 11th, some rain came through, especially way up north, Sandpoint.
It was pretty gnarly yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah. So some stuff got wiped out, but there's still plenty of good stuff to talk about. I wanted to start with golf this week, Ryan, where on Monday, the Mullen Invitational took place. This was at Pinehurst Golf Course in Pinehurst, which is right there by Kellogg.
Yeah.
And so this was kind of a cool deal. It's an unusual tournament, and this wasn't on my radar. I guess this is the way they've always done it, but for some reason I didn't notice until this year. And the Coeur d'Alene Press had a great write-up about the event, but it's basically instead of individuals competing, you pair everybody up. And so it's not a traditional golf tournament. Basically, there's 5 different competitions. You select 2 golfers for each competition, and then whichever school has scored the most points at the end wins the Mullen Invite. So there's boys best ball, girls best ball, boys scramble, girls scramble, and then a Jack and Jill scramble, which is co-ed, 1 boy, 1 girl. I kind of like this. It's a different way to do things.
It'd be actually kind of neat. I think participation wise, I know that at state they'll never do it because they just strictly want the boys championship and the girls championship. But it would be awesome, the warm up day leading up to state, if they did something like this, would be so cool. If the other classifications got a hold of this and like, or all classifications for that matter, did something like kind of similar to this would be super neat. I think it'd be fun as far as for the kids to kind of showcase. But yeah, it's a really neat event. I mean, I think that's it's rare. You don't hear about it all the time. I mean, obviously in tennis, you see mixed doubles and then you have boys singles and girls singles and boys doubles and girls doubles. So it's kind of taking that format, but translating it to the other country club sport being golf. So yeah, no, super neat event. And of course, Kellogg wins the Jack and Jill Scramble, which probably isn't a surprise to many people, but they've been on a bit of a tear lately as far as performance, especially on the boys' side.
Yes. And so for maybe those that aren't quite as plugged into golf, best ball is where you and I are paired up, Ryan. Let's say we're on a hole and I shoot 5, you shoot 4. We take your score 4. That was the best round, but we each play our own ball all the way through. Scramble is where you and I both tee off and we kind of look and go, okay, yours went a little bit further. Let's play where your ball landed. So I pick up my ball, I play from your spot, and we're playing together that way. So there's a little more fluidity in the scramble versus the best ball format. And so, and then the co-ed, the Jack and Jill Scramble as well at the end is a little caveat. So it was really fun to see. And your winners in each, individual competition for boys best ball, it was the St. Mary's duo of Seth Swallows and Landon Warren. The boys scramble went to the Kellogg duo of Jagger Hall and Blake Coburn. Your girls' best ball winners were Sierra Lehman and Audrey Wilson from Genesis Prep. The girls' scramble winners were Kellogg's Casey Finley and Kendra Korosik. And then the Jack and Jill Scramble was won by Stephen Paul and Izzy Groves of Kellogg. So, yeah.
No, it's cool. A cool event. And I mean, it makes me kind of regret not playing golf in high school. Especially days like today. It's absolutely gorgeous here today.
Yeah. And we should mention Kellogg did win, as you mentioned, with the total of 36 because each finish is worth a certain amount of points. It's not okay, here was your shot score under par. It's, did you take first? Okay, you get 10 points. Second place gets 7, so on and so forth. Kellogg only won by 2 points over St. Mary's. And so, I don't know, 2A golf in Idaho, Kellogg, St. Mary's. We've talked about Bonners Ferry a lot on the girls' side for 3A. I'm sure they're happy that Kellogg's not in 3A anymore. Yeah.
No, and I mean, Genesis Prep's still kind of sneaking around there too. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how as the weather improves. We talked about how courses play different. So it'll be interesting to see how things kind of change the next few weeks as the weather is getting really nice.
Yeah. So kind of a cool, unusual golf tournament leading off the North Idaho Prepcast this week. Now let's switch to softball because we have had a flurry of no-hitters recently. Let's start with the most recent one, Ryan. It was last night, Lake City, Tuesday night, playing Sandpoint in the doubleheader. And this is an Inland Empire League doubleheader. These count in the league standings. Lake City wins both games 13-2. 25-0. And in that second game, Kylee Palmer of Lake City throws a no-hitter.
Yeah, throwing a no-no. And it is a 5A versus a 4A. Sandpoint's been struggling. We kind of understand that. But let's not fault Lake City has been on the upward trend as far as how they've been playing this year. That program's really turning a corner, and to get a no-hitter, this point in the season, that's pretty impressive, and obviously it's going to help their climb in the standings as far as the league goes as we approach district play in the next 2-3 weeks. So it'll be interesting to see how things progress as the season goes on. But Lake City, they're not only has their we know their hitting's improved. We've seen it in the last few games. We saw it against Post Falls, but now their pitching and defense has really turned a corner. And so it'll be interesting to see how the T-Wolves, progresses. We've seen some other teams that were favorites slip up in the IEL. So it'll be an interesting, I think, dogfight going down towards the end of the season.
Yeah, so Kylee Palmer pitched both games of the doubleheader, as is pretty common in softball, right? You have a pitcher. It's like back in the 1920s when Walter Johnson, was throwing every 3 days for the Washington Senators. You just ride that pitcher. So the first game, she only allowed 3 hits, had 11 strikeouts. And she turns around in the second game, and besides a walk, she was 1 walk away from a perfect game. The only blemish was she issued
insanity.
1 free pass. So
that's just crazy.
Yeah, it's way to go. And Lake City as a team, by the way, 8-2 overall, 5-1 in the IEL. What a job first year coach Jordan Hensley has done with this team. Preseason we talked about, Lewiston, Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls always has a strong team, and then Lake City was kind of the 4th team mentioned among the 4. And yet here they are leading the way.
And they're like, not so fast. Yeah, I mean, they're kind of calling game right now on everybody. And so, like I said, that the improvement we've seen in the pitching and defense, and then the hitting, turning the corner, they're going to be a force to be reckoned with as, they hit the meat of the 5A schedule.
Yeah, so the team that's also alongside Lake City at the top of the IEL standings is Lewiston. The Bengals are also 5-1 in IEL play. Now they're 6-6 overall, but they've played a pretty challenging schedule so far. The big breakthrough for Lewiston came last night, Tuesday night, in a doubleheader sweep of Coeur d'Alene. This was in Lewiston. The Bengals win the first game 6-5. They win the second contest 8-6. Lewiston basically got to the last inning in the first game, down 1. They were down 5-4. Anna Reddy, little 1-out single, scores the tying run. And then 1 batter later, Ashlyn Schnell is up for Lewiston, and she gets the walk-off. Reddy comes home with the winning run. So Lewiston walks off game 1. They also win game 2, 8-6. And so for Coeur d'Alene, the sweep isn't disastrous. They're 2-2 in league play, 5-3 overall. But I think this just speaks to this league is going to be like like volleyball, like basketball.
Yep.
The IEL is going to be, everybody beating up on everybody.
We talk about parity within the conference, but I think a lot of it's said too. I mean, what a difference you see in, and I don't want to get into turn this into a classification argument, but enrollment size, the similarities within all of the schools. I mean, it leads to having a more competitive balance. And, I think that's what's been evident more than anything in the last few years in all sports has just been, if you can have that balance, as far as enrollment and competition, it makes a big difference for a conference to have, that exciting turnaround. And obviously the exception being the Coeur d'Alene girls basketball team and Lake City boys basketball team. Man, I got those mixed up. But I mean, winning state championships, but that just tells you, like, if you have a balanced league, like it challenges you and prepares you for come state time. And so we're seeing that in softball. I think that's going to translate towards later in the year for sure.
Yeah, Lewiston's lone blemish in league play came to Moscow, one of the 4A schools. They lost to Moscow.
Moscow's having a great season too. So I mean, like that's, that I don't think that that's necessarily a huge red mark on the schedule, just because Moscow's been able to put things together this year. So, it'll be interesting. Like I said, I keep kind of sounding a broken record, but we got to let things play out. But from right now, I mean, from the standpoint, there's a lot of balance within this league.
Yeah, and we'll find out Saturday. Lake City hosting Lewiston for the first of 4 conference battles. It'll be a doubleheader. First game is at noon. Second game at 2:00 on Saturday. That will be very telling here in the early part. We're almost to the midway point now of the softball season. You mentioned enrollment and things like that. We didn't talk about this in the pregame rundown, but I want to get your opinion on the IHSAA meeting from last week as well. We're gonna table that, and we'll talk about that at the very end. But the IHSAA explored some changes that we've been talking about for a long time here on the podcast. So
they kind of did the opposite too of what I've proposed, but I mean, they added, we'll get to it.
Yeah. So stay tuned at the very end. We'll talk about the IHSAA's, proposing or just exploring, expanding state tournaments, changing classification enrollment qualifications. But let's finish up with softball, where It's time for our our weekly tribute to Taci Watkins, the phenomenal pitcher for St. Mary's. She pitched all 4 games over a 2-day stretch. St. Mary's had a doubleheader with Grangeville last Friday, Kellogg last Saturday. The Lumberjacks go 4-0 through all of the contests. And along the way, especially in the second set of games against Kellogg, Taci Watkins pitches a no-hitter and a one-hitter. And basically the no-hitter, the only blemish was she hit a batter, and otherwise it would have been a perfect game. So Kellogg in 2 games against Taci Watkins, 2 base runners, 1 hit by pitch.
Yeah, that's insane. I mean, we got to come up with a nickname for her, like the sheriff or something, because she handcuffs everybody. But, I mean, she's just absolutely. You talk about regardless of classification. I don't know if you get much more of a dominant player in the state of Idaho right now than her. I mean, like the numbers that she puts up, pitching is just absolute insanity. I mean, they're gaudy numbers. So her number of strikeouts, I think we talked about over the weekend, was absolutely insane. And wasn't like 53 or something like that in 2 days.
She threw 23 innings all told among the 4 games, and in 23 innings, 53 strikeouts.
That's freaking bananas. That's just crazy. You don't see that every day. So yeah, she's insane and just a great athlete. And I know that she means a ton to that St. Mary's team, and they gonna ride that arm, challenging for state. I really do look at that. You got a pitcher that dominant and you can handcuff a good offense. It'll be interesting to see how things end up. I don't want to prognosticate too much, looking way too far ahead, but for what they've done so far, they've been flat dominant.
Yeah. So Taci Watkins, 23 innings. That means she faced a total of recorded 69 outs. Of those 69 outs, 53 came via the strikeout. That is like 77% of the outs came on strikeouts.
That's so crazy. That is, man. And softball, baseball is a stats-based game, and you look at all the metrics and everything of that. Like her ERA is insane. I mean, it's microscopic. I mean, it's insane. So like, yeah, what she's doing is something you don't see every day. Like that's just so rare. Which I think, needs the recognition, because she's going to she can just go ahead and build up shop in your primetime pitchers every week, because she's putting up are just video game like numbers.
Yeah. And speaking of, that's a good reminder. We've got new weekly features on IdahoSports.com. Every Monday, we bring you the heavy hitters, the 9 best single game hitting performances in both baseball and softball. Tuesday is our primetime pitchers, the 5 best pitching performances from the past week in baseball and softball. As we transition to baseball talk, Ty Kep of Kendrick he honestly could have made both lists.
Yeah.
I put him on the heavy hitters, but he was one that really stood out to you last week for Kendrick.
Yeah, I mean, he went 3 for 3 against Prairie at the plate, and he was accounted for all 75% of their runs. I mean, that was not only that, but then on the mound, he was stellar pitching, and that pitched all 7 innings in the victory. So yeah, Ty Kep had an insane outing last, against Prairie, and, more than deserving to be on both lists, I think, but he's probably the first arm out of the pen, but after your rotation of 5 that you have, but yeah, just a great week for Ty. He's such a good kid too, and I know he watches the Prepcast every week too, so he deserves the kudos. I mean, he's been so dominant of an athlete for the Tigers, and he's just a great leader. And I know that that Kendrick team, we talk about contenders, and all they do is win. You can cue up the song. They're looking pretty darn good, and they're on a good pace right now this season to make some noise come 1A baseball time.
Yeah, so last Tuesday, Kendrick is playing Prairie, the perennial power Prairie, and it was a tight game. It was only a 2-0 win for Kendrick. So Ty Kep basically responsible for a lot of the reason why Kendrick went out. It's a team game, of course. There's 9 guys. They all contribute, but he pitched the shutout, right? He pitched all 7 innings, didn't allow a single run. And then offensively, we talked about it, 3 for 3, Kendrick only had 4 hits as a team, so 3 of the 4 hits came from Ty Kep. He also stole 2 bases and scored both of Kendrick's runs. So literally, he's all over this 2-0 win.
That's impressive effort from Ty.
Yeah, and then but last night, Tuesday night, Kendrick was kind of riding this wave of momentum, and this is how it goes in the White Pine.
Man,
They're playing. Yep, they played Troy last night, the defending 1A champions from Troy, and Troy gets a 9-1 victory.
It just shows you, man. It's like records be darned in that league. It's just who gets hot at the right time. Like you could 1 through 7 in that conference could win state 1A. But yeah, that conference is just bananas as far as the balance goes.
Yeah, and spoiler alert, we've got some Troy Trojans that are probably going to be on both lists next week because of what happened Tuesday night against Kendrick. On the mound, Dominic Holden, who is, he was a big part of their championship winning team last year. He pitched all 7 innings, gave up 1 run on just 2 hits. He had 15 strikeouts.
Yeah. No, that's insane. And we look at, it's funny, it's like Prairie in the conference until the losing, that game, they're 3-0 in league going into that game against Kendrick. Lewis County has a great record. Kendrick's got a great record. Troy's, I mean, it's just like you look at those top 4 teams right now, they're kind of distancing themselves without even trying within the White Pine League. It's just, I think that conference just looks so good right now. And it'll be interesting to see. I mean, offensively, we're going to see fireworks as far as we're going to get nicer weather. That's the other part too that's really hindering this conference is we've had some snow outs in the last couple of weeks and then a couple rain outs this week. So as weather clears up and the weather gets nicer, who knows, maybe they take my word of advice and head to Lewiston to make up some of those games. But yeah, I mean, that league is just, it's going to be really interesting and fun to watch coming down the stretch to who's going to kind of take the mantle. I mean, Lewis County's averaging 11 runs a game. That's bananas numbers in high school baseball.
Yeah. So Troy last night gets the 9-1 win, and we'll talk about Lewis County in just a second because they had a big accomplishment on Monday. But Dominic Holden, 1 run, unearned, 15 strikeouts. He on the season now. Holden has pitched 18 innings, has only allowed 3 runs, 3 walks, 33 strikeouts in 18 innings of work. His ERA is 0.16.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm coach at LCSE and I'm looking for recruits and I don't have to go outside of my backyard, I mean, there's a good one sitting right there as far as pitching goes. Holy cow.
And so he, Dominic Holden will be on our primetime pitchers list next week. We're going to have a heavy hitter from Troy too, because last night, Joseph Bendel, 3 for 4 with 4 RBI, but of his 3 hits, 2 of them were home runs.
Yeah.
He left the yard twice.
Yeah, no, they're just, I mean, it's fun to watch right now. I mean, like you really look at this and like, I think small school baseball gets overlooked a little bit in Idaho. And, you look at the especially the 1As, you get some really quality players. You may not have the depth that you get at some of the larger schools, but you're still going to get some pretty quality kids. And we're seeing that right now, with Troy and Kendrick and Prairie and Lewis County for that matter too. What they're doing offensively is crazy. But yeah, it's a fun conference to watch, and I'm excited to see how things kind of progress as we get fewer rainouts. And
then Lewis County on Monday swept Genesee. Now Genesee's kind of fallen on hard times, just overall athletically, right? But it was only 2.
Yeah, the enrollment they're dipping and everything. It's caused some issues.
Yes, but it was only 2 years ago that Genesee was your 1A state baseball champions. Lewis County sweeps Genesee on Monday night, and in the process pick up their first White Pine League victory in 3 years. What an accomplishment for the Eagles, the co-op between Nez Perce and Highland.
Yeah, no, that's a great accomplishment, and something that I know the kids and the coaches are probably savoring a little bit. It's like getting that accomplishment and rolling through things that they're not done yet. I think they've got higher aspirations than just getting the first league win. You kind of look at what they're doing, and granted, you look at the competition, but at the same time, you can only take care of what's in front of you. And if you're playing every game in and out that's on your schedule, tough, I think it's going to work out for them better than not. So, do they finish at the top of the White Pine League at the end of the year? I don't know, but I still think that they're a top 4 team. It's going to be a lot to be seen. The Clearwater Valley has only played like 2 or 3 games, if I'm not mistaken, so far. I think they went a full week without even being able to play a game just due to weather. So it'll be interesting to see as the Rams get rolling too, if they can turn some things around, because they got a good program too.
Yeah, it's that district tournament's going to be a lot of fun to watch, for sure. So, all right, let's wrap up today with last week. The Idaho High School Activities Association, the IHSAA, met for their monthly meeting, and they talked about a lot of intriguing things, like adding javelin to track and field, which I think is great.
I think it's cool. Washington does it. A number of schools around us do it. Yeah.
I grew up in Montana and did track and threw the javelin all 4 years, and I loved it. It was my favorite event. So, so that is being proposed. Expanding the state volleyball tournament from 2 days to 3 days, I think, is also great. And could we expand softball too while we're at it? I mean, softball's only a 2-day tournament as well. But expanding state volleyball, I think, is a great idea. Maybe looking at different venues to use for postseason events. But the 2 big things that were discussed were expanding state tournaments and then reconfiguring the enrollment numbers that are used to determine the classification. So let me get your opinions on these. And if you don't know what we're talking about, right on the top of the homepage at IdahoSports.com, yours truly wrote a nice article about everything they talked about, and you can get all of the details there. But let's talk about expanding the state tournaments first, because this is something that's picked up a lot of steam and a lot of people in East Idaho, but also we've talked about it up north. And so the proposal is that basically, there's 5 districts in every classification except 5A. The top 4 of those 5 district champions, according to Max Prep's rankings, would automatically advance to state. The other 4 spots to get to state, and this is in volleyball, basketball, soccer, volleyball, basketball, soccer, and softball, 4 sports. Yeah. The other 4 spots would then be determined by a series of play-in games.
I love it.
Prior to the state tournament, where you would have your fifth district champion, and then the next 7 highest ranked teams, according to Max Preps, fighting it out for a spot to state.
I love it. I think that gets you the best tournament you're going to get. And then, I mean, you think about it this way too, and it's not, you're going to get the most competitive teams, the ones that are on a roll that are deserving of finding their way in. It opens the door to getting the 3 bids from the IEL possibly, because of the Max Preps rankings getting in there, and then you get the play-in matchups and everything else. Take this year, for example, and what could have taken place, and you could look at, say, on the boys' side, is Lake City still going to be the 1 seed? They're still an auto bid to state. But if you look at the girls' side, Coeur d'Alene still gets in, but Lake City, gets an extra game. I mean, they don't have that one play-in game against Eagle. They get an extra bid or an extra game. You're going to get another team from East Idaho that's going to get that extra chance that may have missed because, you only get a 1 bid conference or a bid and a half, and then they lose a tough game and a loser out to, another team. So I think it levels the playing field as far as getting the most competitively balanced field into the state tournament. The state of Ada doesn't get to run the show with their 5 auto bids and, basically hold their nose in the air to everybody else. I love it. And that's not a slight to, there's a lot of good teams in District 3. Like, I'm going to be honest about that at 5A and 4A level. However, there's a lot of good teams that are sitting at home state weekend too, statewide. So it changes and it makes it that play-in weekend is going to be so dang entertaining to watch too. I mean, that's like the first rounds of the NCAA tournament. Like if you really compare the two, I mean, we know State's going to be kind of like the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight and the Final Four, obviously, but like you get that first round games like on a neutral site, like kind of you might have some games at ICC Arena in Moscow. You might have some games in the new arena in Idaho Falls. That's an exciting event for those kids that may not have gotten a state opportunity to get down to Boise and play down there in Nampa, in the Boise area. They get to have that big experience for that play-in weekend. I love it. I'm all for it, in basketball especially. But I think the other sports too, expanding volleyball to 3 days makes sense. Like you look at some of the teams that don't make state in volleyball, it sometimes is even worse than basketball. So it'll be really interesting to see, I think, if the state moves forward with this and we pass it, there could be a changing of the guard a little bit, I think, as far as the state championships are going to get spread out even more statewide at the larger classifications.
And it would ebb and flow, using basketball as an example this year, using this format, there's a good chance that the Post Falls girls get to go to state in basketball, or at least get to compete for it. They didn't even get that opportunity. But on the same side of the token, do the Lakeland boys make it to state under this format?
They would be the 5 seed. They would have gone in. Who knows what happens? They could have got knocked off by,
probably not, if we're being honest, Lakeland probably doesn't make it. And then there's no teams from the North, but I'm okay with that.
I am too. Cause then the years where it's top heavy, you may have a really strong Moscow and a really strong Sandpoint, or really strong Moscow and Lakeland, whatever mixture of 3 teams you want. Especially if this classification thing mixes up, then you got Lewiston thrown in at the lower classification with Lakeland, Sandpoint, Moscow. Like that makes things really interesting. If you want to talk about what that would look like with a new classification system, holy cow, like that's a new ball game. And I think we're gonna see state tournaments we've never seen before as far as competition goes.
Yeah, and like even in girls soccer, we talked about Moscow, Sandpoint, 2 really good teams, and under this new proposed system, both teams would have a chance to play at state and compete. And so I like it. Again, nothing official taken on it, just exploratory discussions. They're going to talk about it again at their June meeting, and we'll continue to follow the story there as well. And that's also the caveat for the second big proposal, which is reconfiguring the enrollment numbers that are required for each specific classification, and basically changing the designations now. Under the current system, you have 5A, 4A, 3A, 2A, 1A, D1, 1A, D2. Under this new proposal, it would be 6A, 5A, 4A, 3A, 2A, 1A. And just as it pertains to North Idaho, the big change would be at the largest level, the 6A, where the numbers would change from 1,000 currently to be a 5A school. You have to have an enrollment of 1,280 students or higher. Under the new proposal, it would be 1,400. So you're talking about 120 more students. Well, under the new parameters, Lewiston actually would fall into the next lowest level. Lewiston would no longer be a 5A, they'd be a 4A. And so you're looking at, or under this proposal, they wouldn't be a 6A, they'd be a 5A. So you're looking at then a split of,
for a couple of years, Lewiston's getting bigger. I mean, they'll be back at the 6A within 2 years.
And this is all fluid, right? But you're looking at, it would be Lake City, Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls, and that's it. And then at the 5A level, it would be Moscow, Lewiston, Sandpoint, Lakeland. Interesting.
Yeah. The thing I look at with the current system was the spread at 4. I mean, you look at everyone looks at 5A now, and they're like, oh, that spread is just crazy. You have, Timberline with 2,600 students, and you've got Rocky Mountain with 2,200 students and all this stuff, and then you have, your smallest 5A school has an enrollment of, it says 1,280. I think the smallest 5A school is, I think, right around 1,300 kids. But I haven't looked at the numbers since I'm trying to write an article right now. So we've been talking about this for a couple of years now. I think this has been in the works, but they didn't get rid of, I still think we need to get rid of the classification. personally, that's where I stand. It makes more sense to drop a classification out, and you can spread the numbers around a little more evenly, because the spread, what they're doing essentially with the new 6A is 14 and above, is that you made 5A spread now bigger. That was a problem before, and it's even more problematic now with this new system where it goes from 700 to 1400. I mean, you have a 700 student spread at a classification level. In my mind, you're still not fixing the problem at hand with some of the other classifications. This only really affects 10 teams. If you really look at it in the grand scheme of things, it affects 10 schools. But you look at, the new 4A, it's 350 to 699, to where it would be the old 3A, which is 639 to 320. So that spread kind of stays the same. It just shifts up a little bit. But what does it do is the fallout in the new 3A goes to 175 to 349, where the old 2A is 319 to 160. And then 2A, which is the old 1A D1, would be 90 to 174. Kendrick's one student away from being a 1A D1 school. I don't know if everybody realizes that. The difference in those teams is minimal. I mean, when you get to that small of a level, the only thing you're really going to see is in the contact sports, is where it really makes the difference. And so, what I proposed was really adding a classification for football and dropping a classification for all other sports. Because I think at football is where you see the biggest amount of parity, is where you have the need in the contact sport because of participation numbers. You have to be able to spread that on the top end. You're telling me that Shelley right now is, enrollment wise, is on the same level of, Lewiston, because that's what's going to happen. I mean, you could have Lewiston and Shelley in state football. That's a big spread, because Shelley's barely a 4A school right now. So it doesn't really fix the problem. It only fixes it for a few people. And, so moving forward, what's the correct fix? And I mean, Idaho enrollment wise, I mean, I look at other states around us, we're separated geographically because you have that band of nothingness, through central Idaho, where you have literally Salmon River, Meadows Valley, and McCall within 100 miles of their next league opponent. And it's, it's not fair to them to but that's how geographically we're kind of oriented in Idaho. And so what makes the most sense though still is, geographics be darned. I don't think we need classifications that only have 21 schools. I'm sorry, but that just doesn't make sense. And I think it dilutes a state championship. But that's my opinion.
Yeah, and we can get into this deeper in June. It'd be a great off-season podcast to talk about. But I kind of like the idea of what Nebraska does, and that is we take our 32 largest schools, and that's our biggest classification, and we will draw up the conference assignments from there.
Yeah.
Then we take the next 32.
Yeah. And I'm looking forward to getting that article out. I'll probably have it done in the next month or so. Because I did mess with what would the new conferences and new districts look like. One, we got to get out of our existing district way we have it. There's no reason District 3 shouldn't be split up. I think it needs to be 2 districts. There's enough schools there to necessitate that. And there's an easy way of doing it because you can use counties. There's enough schools now that have formed between Boise Metro and West Ada and Nampa and Caldwell. You can build new districts down there pretty darn easily and separate some of these. You don't need a 18-team super conference in the state of Idaho. You can have 2 leagues pretty easily and then have some crossover games and fix your problem as far as scheduling goes. But there's some easy fixes. It's just going to take the state of Ada being flexible.
Yeah, and
that's difficult.
I don't know. I don't know if we've seen that movie before.
Yeah, but if everybody statewide, I mean, bands together with an idea that this is better for the athletes in the state of Idaho, I mean, we can solve a big problem. And let's let, if we're going to penalize the North and the East teams for travel, and Ada's well, we don't want to travel. It's well, everybody else does. Why don't you guys have to? And so, if everybody else has to travel for their games, mixing things up a little bit's not going to hurt anybody, I think, because if it means that the greater scheme of things of our product's better, why not try it? We can do it for a 4-year cycle. And if it stinks, go back to how we did it.
Yep. Yeah. And we're looking forward to that. You actually did a really nice article last year. And then I just never published it. There was a couple of things we needed to tweak on it, and then I got lost in the shuffle. But this would be a great time to, because you kind of came up with your own numbers.
Yeah,
we're kind of having an editorial meeting here on the podcast, but I would kind of want you to stick to your own numbers, not necessarily go off of what they proposed. Let's see what you come up with. I would be intrigued to see, how it differed, and is it better,
Well, I like now that they're going off of true enrollment numbers instead of like the artificial whatever number of students that you have, that if they're, below certain, economic status or whatever. I understand that some of that stuff needs to take place to an extent, but it creates these uneven balances to where you have a school with 1,600 kids playing a schedule of teams that have an enrollment of like 500. It doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense. But I mean, yeah, and if it's about the best interest of the kids and you're going to get the best products on the field, top by and large, top to bottom, you got to be flexible and you got to stick with hard numbers. You really do.
And I think schools would still have the ability to petition down a level in certain sports if they wanted to. We really only saw it one time this year, Wood River playing down
Caldwell. Caldwell and Wood River, but yeah.
So we'll see. But that's on the homepage, IdahoSports.com, and we will circle back to this topic in June before the IHSAA gets together for their June meeting. So, all right, a lot of good stuff on the podcast this week. Everybody, thanks for tuning in. And I've included my email address here on the bottom. If you're watching the video on IdahoSports.com's YouTube channel, Brandon at IdahoSports.com. If there's athletes,
send all the hate mail there, all of it.
Right. And I'll make sure it gets to the proper person because it's never at me. If there's an athlete, a team, a story that you want us to talk about, send me the email and we'll get it on for you. Definitely. So, all right. The newly engaged Ryan Scaggs. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you. You as well.
All right. For Ryan Scaggs, I'm Brandon Baney. We'll see you next time on IdahoSports.com.